Yeah, thank you very much, Annie. And I'd like to say a big welcome to everybody, and especially big welcome to Brian and Ben and Julie. And thank you very much for coming along tonight to be part of our panel discussion on motivation. I'm going to do an acknowledgement of country, and then we'll go around and introduce ourselves. So to start with, I would like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge that the country that I'm on is country of the Gadigal and Wongal people of the Eora Nation. And I think we've just lost Julie, unfortunately. So hopefully, I know Julie was having some technological problems, but hopefully she'll be able to rejoin us. I'm going to introduce myself very briefly. So I'm Simone Dorsch. I'm one of the StrokeEd directors, and I teach at the Australian Catholic University. And I'd like to hand over to Brian now to introduce himself.
Thank you, Simone. Well, good evening, good afternoon, and good morning, wherever you are. It's great to be here. Yes, my name is Brian Beh, and I'm six and a half years post-stroke. I sustained a left lacuna stroke in April 2016. I turned 75 a week ago, and I retired in 2012. My previous employment, I was a management consultant, spent 30 years in the corporate communications business, and I spend a great deal of my time now utilising my lived experience and being involved in research projects, webinars like this, and spending a lot of time talking to student clinicians about my stroke, my lived experience, and also the insights and learnings that I gleaned from being in Bankstown Hospital for 16 weeks in 2016. I'm also involved in stroke advocacy. I'm the inaugural chairman of the Consumer and Community Advisory Group of the George Institute of Global Health in Australia, and I'm looking forward to taking part in this webinar tonight and letting you know how after 6.5 years I'm still as motivated as ever. So over to Ben.
Thanks, Brian. I'm Ben, I'm 52. 6 years ago, I suffered a brainstem stroke, and my rehab was quite challenging. So I'm here to talk about it a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for introducing yourselves. Hopefully Julie will be able to rejoin us, and then if she does, we'll ask her to introduce herself. So with Brian and Ben, we have two stroke survivors who are quite famous, I would have to say now, internationally, and you're both several years after your stroke and still motivated to keep working towards specific goals. So I'd like to ask you both, what are the really critical things that have helped you to be motivated, and particularly that have helped you to be motivated over such a long period of time as well? Should we go to you to start, Brian?
Okay, thanks, Simone. I think one of the strongest motivations for me to keep engaging in rehab 6.5 years post-stroke was that I knew what it was like before and after the stroke, and what drives me is that I didn't want to spend the rest of my life in a wheelchair. I didn't want to spend my life with about 5% of the use of my right arm. So it was knowing what I was a key motivator in me, being so focused and driven in inpatient care, and also continuing on in my post-stroke life. I'm very orientated towards goal behaviours. I'm what you would call a numbers nerd. I plan. I still, for example, today I walked 12 Ks, walked 2 hours in the morning and an hour at night. I just came back just before the huge storm in Sydney. And in order to keep going with my other aspects of my rehab, my reaching and my holding in my damaged right hand. I've integrated that into my everyday activities. My reaching is I put the washing on the line, take the washing down. My wife loves me for this. I empty the dishwasher, and to be short, I've integrated everything into my all of my rehab into my daily routine. So it becomes part of my life rather than I'm setting aside an hour in the morning to do my reaching. It's now part of my life.
So I'm talking with my mute button. That's a
Aha.
you have to do that at some stage during a Zoom webinar, I think, don't you?
Yeah.
Thank you, Brian. Hand over to you now, Ben. What are the main things that have really helped you to keep going with your rehab?
Well, I wanted just to be the best version I could be of myself. So I looked at my grandchildren and thought, I want to be the best granddad I could be. I want to be the best husband I can be. And I do know that at some point, there will be a point that I do my exercises to not get any worse. That point will come. I will not be improving all the time. Although 6 years post my stroke, I'm still improving. So that motivates me as well. But I kept my motivation most out of daily life. I want to go to the park with my grandkids. I want to take them out. I do not want to be dependent on someone to go to the town and do my shopping. I want to do that myself. And everything you do is exercises. So if you go to the shop and you reach for something or you carry your shopping bag, it's exercise. People need to get rid of the idea that exercise is something technical and it's only exercises from physios or OTs. It's not. Everything is rehab. So that's very motivating.
Yeah. It's part of everyday life rather than something divorced from it. Yeah.
That's why rehab has to be functional.
Yes.
It has to be useful in daily life, in my opinion.
And it also has to be realistic and it has to be relevant, and it's something that you've got to want to do. It's got to be relevant in our lives. For example, if it's not, well, you soon lose interest.
Can I stick with you, Benny, for the moment? And I know that there's some specific things that happened back in your earlier rehab that you found quite demotivating. And I think there's some very important messages, particularly for therapists listening, if you could talk to us about that.
Yeah. So in early rehab, two things really. One, the nurses coming in and asking me if I wanted a wee, like I was 10 years old. It really does not help. And then exercise-wise, you have the little blocks and you have to put them in the corresponding figure. No, you don't put shapes in the corresponding hole. You make cups of tea, or that's what you do. Not like, and I know them exercise have a value, but they lose their value after doing it 2 weeks straight. When the therapist comes in and says, here's the exercise, put the shape in the corresponding hole. No.
Yeah.
That really drove me up the wall and really took down my motivation. I thought, if it's going to be like this, what's the point?
Yes. Julie, you're back. Very nice to see you back with us.
These computer issues, isn't it dreadful? I do apologize.
Yeah. That's okay.
I gather we've moved on to I can hear Benny's frustration with the square pegs and the round holes.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yes. Julie, we missed you introducing yourself because you weren't with us when we were doing that. So would you like to introduce yourself? And then we'll catch up with your bits of where we're up to.
Okay, cool. My name's Julie Davey, and I live in northeastern Victoria in Australia. It's sort of an area where there's it's very mountainous, and we live in a valley, and there's beautiful wine and great fruit and so forth grown here, and it's very verdant in terms of its the environment, and the Indigenous or First Nations people who lived here were the Babangarang, which is quite hard to say, people, and so I live here. As of 3 years ago, I moved from Melbourne to have a sort of a tree change into the country area to sort of slow, I guess, have a bit more of a natural lifestyle. I had my stroke in 2015. I actually had 3 strokes in one night, and sent away from the hospital each time until the last one. Unfortunately misdiagnosed. So I was in a pretty bad way by that stage, but I was lucky to then have rehab in Melbourne with a great team. And before I had my stroke, I was a health service manager, so I knew the best places to go to have stroke rehab, and even the best professor to go and have it with. So that was good. So I wanted, after having had a stroke, I sort of, that search for self, I was really wanting to still contribute, and that's why I've done lots of work with in the sort of, I guess, the volunteer area in relation to stroke service, improving stroke services, and policies around stroke.
And where we started with Brian and Benny was sort of summarising the main things that help you to be motivated to do rehab.
Yeah. So I think I put those things in 2 different categories. One, which was while I was in rehab in the beginning, straight after stroke, and then now what maintains my my desire to still undertake rehab activities, I guess, is my desire to live a full life. And so I really enjoy I enjoy gardening, I enjoy walking in nature, I love bird watching, I really enjoy dancing to live music and listening to live music, and having friends over and cooking and having barbecues and generally socializing and being involved in things. So in order to do those things and be, a contributing member of the community, you really need to keep your rehab going, otherwise you sort of, lose it, really. You've got to use it or lose it. And now it's just part of what I do. Even if I'm sitting in the waiting room at the doctor's, I'll do maybe sit to stand while I'm in the chair, or I'll do, marching while I'm sitting, or, something along that line, because, I figure no time's should be wasted on that sort of stuff. Yes,
very similar to the messages that Brian and Benny were saying about really integrating it into your life and doing all sorts of kind of like just normal everyday life that actually can also become part of your rehab as well. That just helps to maintain and still continue, like Brian does lots of things with his arm that are sort of everyday things, which help to improve, still are helping to improve his arm function.
I agree. I find things like squats when I'm loading the dishwasher, or I guess just even things like doubling up on a stepping up and stepping down from a step, or when I'm in the garden, I'll do stuff that will be quite deliberate about using my arm in a broader way than I would normally, probably a more pronounced sort of way. And look, dancing is fantastic, and you can daggy dance as much as you want in your kitchen. And dancing while cooking is an excellent sort of thing, as long as you're safe. But but having music on and doing things in the house and making sure that you're moving your body is fun.
Yes. Yes. And then our next topic, which Benny was telling us about, was things that are demotivating. And Benny had spoken to some particular experiences of his earlier rehab about the way people spoke to him, and of practicing really meaningless tasks, putting sort of, I guess, childish kind of tasks as well too. But maybe I'll hand over to Brian, and then come back to you again, Julie. Brian, do you want to tell us about things that you found demotivating?
Yeah, well, I'm a fairly motivated type A personality, so the answer I put to that question was I didn't find anything demotivating, but because I made them, I had my own motivating levels. Ben spoke about the episode he had of being spoken to like a child. Well, I had that when I was at hospital, and it involved the bodily function as well. They don't seem to be able to say go to the toilet. They say, well, it was the person spoke to me and said, described as doing a poo-poo, and I very quickly told him in a rather aggressive way to leave my presence, otherwise piss off, and come back when he knew how to talk to a mature, well-educated man. So that didn't demotivate me, it just made me a little bit cranky about it. And but I basically, in my experience at Bankstown, the 16 weeks, I found that particularly on the physio side, there was nothing. They were all engaged, they were all doing all the right things, and they were answering all my questions. I insisted before I did any rep, as you know, Simone, you were there with me during my time, that I asked them, why are you asking me to do sit stands? How does it impact on my rehab? And how is it going to help my objective to walk out of Bankstown Hospital? Now, if they could answer those questions, I would do it. If they couldn't answer it, I wouldn't do it. But they got to know after a while that I was a fairly involved and motivated person, and that's my nature. So there was very little that didn't demotivate me.
What about you, Julie? Have you had times when there's specific things that have happened that have demotivated you, or things that people have done that have had that effect?
I would probably agree with Brian. It's not so much about I mean, I think if you are motivated, if you're a person who gets, intrinsic sort of motivation from your own values or what you're wanting to achieve, it's not so much, I guess it could be demotivating for someone who is feeling very maybe uncertain. So like I've found things more like being deflated rather than demotivated by people saying, you really want to say something back to people when they say, you look fantastic, you must have had a really small stroke, and you want to go, oh, right, okay.
And, would you like to try it?
Yeah, would you like to try it? Would you like to actually see a picture of me, unable to speak, swallow, sit, stand, whatever. Or people who, quite close people who say, oh, you're so lucky you weren't in a nursing home. Well, you wouldn't say that to anybody, would you? I mean, it's just unbelievable. And I guess the times where I've been a little bit more frustrated, where it's had more of an impact of me, when I've been in a group program and having run groups myself in the past, there's a balance between giving individual people attention and giving the whole group, and knowing that there might be people who have special additional needs, but then actually finding, well, why am I in this group program? Because I'm actually not getting anything out of it. And sometimes I guess demotivating things can be things like setbacks, like I've found when I've had falls or accidents, like I fell off a badly set up situation in a post-stroke exercise program where the treadmill wasn't actually controlled properly, and I was thrown off it and broke my wrist. And so that really set my upper limb rehab back. And that was very demotivating because all of my gains had sort of just went out the window then for the next 8 months. So, but apart from that, I think people's expectations are the main things I think that can be demotivating. Like I think health professionals, family members, carers need to understand that what they say can have quite an impact on people when they're in a vulnerable state, you know, and to say to them, oh, you won't get better, or you're lucky you're where you are, is a very negative thing to say.
And there's a lot of myths that sort of get perpetuated, I think, too, aren't they? Like you're only going to improve for 6 months or 12 months, where that's obviously not correct, because we see stroke survivors, you know, 10, 15 years after their stroke making big gains and stuff too. So
just on that, Simone, I did a blog on that called The Long and Winding Road, where I put some time frames down for some highlights, and I just from memory, there were 3 years and 200 days before I could tie my shoelaces, 5 years and 200 days before I could use my right hand, use a knife in my right hand to cut my steak. And that was after a 15-minute session in my house with Carl and Annie. And there was another one about three years and two months that I was able to shake Stephanie Ho's hand with my right hand as opposed to my damaged hand. So this thing about you plateau, I hate that word. It should never be used.
It's a dreadful word,
because Ben, Julie, and myself, we're getting stronger every day. We're getting more proficient. I mean, my confidence level of going up steps at the Padania railway station is growing and growing. So it just doesn't stop.
No, it doesn't.
And we have a lot of therapists in the audience, so I guess I'm sort of interested in what messages you've particularly got for therapists. But I guess one of the things that I would like to emphasize is that we obviously are talking to 3 stroke survivors who, as you say, Julie, you have like a lot of intrinsic motivation. But I think really, you know, particularly early after stroke, a lot of people don't feel that motivated at all to do things. And, you know, they've had this horrific event that's completely changed their lives. And sometimes therapists will say things like, oh, they're so unmotivated. I think, well, why would you be motivated necessarily after you've had such a big event happen to you, and you've got all this new disability to deal with and things. And there's a very good study done by actually some physios up in Brisbane, doing interviews with people in inpatient stroke rehab, and one of the very strong messages is the stroke survivors saying that they actually need external motivators. And I think as therapists, we absolutely should be taking on board that it is our role to help provide ways of motivating people to help them with their rehab. So I guess what I'd like to find out from you is, what are the sorts of things that you think that therapists can do that are helpful to increase motivation, and maybe particularly thinking about other stroke survivors or people you might have seen in rehab who might not have had as much motivation as you guys have had towards your rehab. We start with you, Benny. Big messages for the therapists out there about how to help to provide external motivation.
Well, I think it's crucial that you get to know the person. What is he or she like? How was she before a stroke, or he before a stroke? And that is crucial, because then you can implement things they used to like, maybe in their rehab, and get them motivated. Another thing is, set goals with your patients. As a therapist, don't just set goals for them, set them with the patient, and then you can divide those in little sub goals and celebrate those achievements. That is very, very important. I remember celebrating with a pint of Guinness the first time I walked to the toilet.
That's a good reward system.
Yeah.
But that's a good, but you know what I mean? It's not just all well done.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's, here you go, and you feel human again for that 5 or 10 minutes. And that's very important, in my opinion. And yeah, and also having a rest as a patient doesn't mean you're not motivated. When you're fatigued, have a rest. I'm gonna give, and this is right up your street, Simone. If you want to do 1,000 reps, you don't have to do them all at once.
No.
You can do 4 sessions of 250. That's 1,000 as well. But as a stroke survivor, you have to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Also, as a therapist, try to tell your patients to not compare them to other stroke survivors,
Yes.
because they might have a different stroke or have it earlier or be further in their rehab. And it's no good thinking, oh, he or she can walk, why can't I? That is no good at all. That is the one thing that got me down seriously during my rehab. You look at somebody else and you think, oh, he can walk and I can't.
Yes.
And it's just not good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that are the main things, really.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's actually, it's one of the things that Brian says when he's giving his lecture to my students is, in some ways, like no two people ever have the same stroke. It's that everybody's stroke is different. Yeah.
When I was in rehab, I had this, when I went to Queen Square, I had this really good physio. Her name was Annie. She was 29. And I said to her, I said, I know we're all different. I need encouragement. I need swearing at, anything you want. And she did. But she really helped me. I'm not one for the soft approach for me, but I know there are people who, that's why you have to get to know your patients. Does she or need a push, or does she need an arm around the shoulder? That's very important.
Yeah, and it's a specific question you could ask of somebody, what.
Yeah. I need a kick of the bum. I do.
Yeah.
Can I hand over to you, Brian? What's your advice for therapists?
All right, I agree with everything that Ben says. My answer is the overarching thing is treat the person and not the patient, and that if you start from that basis, develop a rehab plan for them. Don't develop the rehab plan for you. Develop it for them. Make sure it's relevant. It's something that they want to do, and it's realistic and it's relevant. They might want to sort of walk again. They might want to be able to use their hand to play tennis or play golf, but make sure it's relevant. The other thing is, Ben said, get to know them. Well, that first interaction that the clinician has with the stroke survivor is so very, very important. It's like you walk into the sales room and it's the first impressions are the best. So take the time to sit down and talk to them about who they were, what they are, what they want. And if their family are around, I'm a great believer in involving the family, because they can be your eyes and ears. When you're not there as the clinician, they can be the motivator, they can be the recorder, they can be the policeman. As you know, my family are much harder on me than the clinicians were at Bankstown. Build rapport, and every time you have an interaction with a stroke survivor, have a goal. Whether even if it's for half an hour, or a day, you have a goal, and you sit and spend 5 minutes of that first with that stroke survivor and agree that what we're going to do today is this, and you get the buy-in, so they get some skin in the game, so that it's not going to be just, oh, let's do sit to stands because we did sit to stands yesterday. We're doing something to improve, and then as Benny said, celebrate. I mean, the first time I walked back to the ward, I think it was about 45 or 50 metres. It took me something like 11 minutes, and there was a guy with a wheelchair behind. Well, I got a gold star and a cup of coffee. That was my reward. Now, I've been awarded 7 international awards for marketing in my career. They're sitting in cylinders somewhere. That gold star sits on my radio. It's still there, and the gold is gone. But that's how much value, and that's how important it was that you can get some recognition. Yeah, but treat the person and not the patient.
Yes. Yeah. Julie, what would you like to add?
I'd like to echo the guy's statements. I think that get to know the person thing is really crucial, and it's kind of multifaceted really, because not only does the health professional need to get to know the person themselves in terms of what their interests are and background and so forth, they need to get past what maybe some of their assumptions about someone at that age might be. So at 55, when I had my stroke, a lot of younger people might have thought, well, you know, she'll probably be into, you know, sort of boomer stuff, you know, that sort of thing. And probably wouldn't have assumed that I'd been a member of a band, or that that I got thrown out of a pub in England, you know, or you know, whatever. You know, lots of things. I mean, I'm not trying to say that I'm a terrible person, you know, but what I'm trying to say is that, you know, my life was a very, I was surrounded by lots of young people and lots of activity and interest, but also I loved the arts, and I loved, you know, reading and stuff about social justice and things. I think that the first part of the things that I often saw when I was in rehab was not so much for people my age, but for people, older people. They were immediately kind of put in a kind of a category of, this is an older person who's had a stroke. And there wasn't as much, and I'll be honest, I think there wasn't as much effort in getting to know who they were. So, you know, older people have interests and concerns and hobbies and interests and so forth, just as much as other people do. And similarly, people of different cultural backgrounds, like it's really worth, you know, trying to work with the family or with an interpreter to actually get to know that person who might speak another language, or whose understanding might be different. And spend the time to do that, because time spent in that getting to know the person is well spent and can come back and pay dividends in terms of progress later. It's a bit like, you know, in the social, I'm an old social worker in my background, don't hold it against me, but it's a bit that assessment process, you know, that's really worth it. It's really worth making a rapport. And I think I've said to maybe you before, Simone, that one of the things that helped me in rehab and was very motivating was people sharing a sense of humour and sharing some fun in the work that we did together. But again, that's really a very personal thing, and some people don't like that in their healthcare, and sometimes people overstep the mark as well. So it's very much about a sensitivity about not only who the person is, but also perhaps what stage they're up to in their grief, because you know, as you said, you know, stroke, it's traumatic, and people, I always think it's interesting at conferences, they talk about traumatic brain injury as being things to do with car accidents or work accidents, but they don't talk about stroke as being a traumatic brain injury. But in fact, it's a trauma, because one day you can do, you know, A to Z, and next day you can only do, you know, A and F, you know, or whatever. A whole life is thrown into disarray, and you've got to go through that process. So I think some of it might be that I would say to health professionals is check in. Like, it can just be how are you going today, and then really listen to the answer, because it might be that day they're not going to get a hell of a lot done, because they're actually in the stage of actually just ignoring or trying to deal with the very fact that they've actually had a stroke. And it might be you'll get better work done tomorrow. But, you know, or they're in a stage where they're actually really, you know, feeling depressed about this situation, and maybe they need some other help. I think that whole thing about teamwork in in rehab is so important. The motivating thing about rehab is when one of the things is when health professionals are working together, and that Mary has spoken to Tim about this, and they've said, oh great, we're both on the same track, well we'll do that next and then leave you to do that bit. And how does that sound, Julie? That whole working together as a team
Yes.
is great.
Yeah. One of the challenges I had at Bankstown, the physiotherapy aspect of it was unbelievably excellent. Where there was a little bit of down or not downtime, or wasn't as good as was with the other aspects of the rehab process. I'm talking about the occupational therapists, the things like the dress group, the arm class, that these were not, at no stage was it ever explained to me what role that these played in the rehab process. So there wasn't a sense of synergy in it. So I went to the arm class for about a couple of weeks, and then I didn't go because I didn't appear to be helpful. The dress group, well, I went to that for about 3 times, and then I always pegged out early to get back into the rehab gym to do my physio. That there wasn't, and I brought this when I left Bankstown. I asked the rehab manager there that could I have an exit interview with him, and this was an alien event because they never. He said, why? And I said, well, I've been a customer of yours for 16 weeks, and I can give you some insights into the process that you employ, and the service delivery was part of my background. And he took it on board, whether or not he's, and I told him that the main thing was the lack of relationship between physio, occupational therapy, etc. in my rehab. They were just functional activities which bore no relevance, whereas I could see that with the physiotherapy, and that was quite interesting.
Yes, yeah, and I think as a therapist, there's all this kind of stuff that all becomes very kind of normal. That there's this, these type of exercises for hand function, and there's this dressing group for this, but you don't kind of necessarily stop to think that this is kind of all maybe pretty weird stuff for somebody who doesn't go into that environment every day and has just had this event,
and I
really awful event that has landed them in there, and there's sometimes not that communication about how it all fits and some of its relevance.
I tell a story against myself that I went into the dress group and they asked us to bring in a pair of shoes so that we could tie laces up, and all my shoes were slip-ons, and I brought them in and I put them on. I could show that I could slip my black shoes on, and the clinician said, well, can you bring in some lace-ups next week, and so we can see how you go with lace-ups. And I was being the prat that I am. I said, no, lace-ups are so 70s. I've long gone past that. But then, that was it was interesting. Yeah.
Sounds like him, doesn't it, Ben?
It's therapists need to prepare you for your life when you go home. Because when you go home, there isn't an OT, there isn't a physio, there isn't a nurse. So when I went home, the first day I was home, my wife made me a flask of coffee. And I said to her the next day, if I want a drink, I make it myself. So and this is my wife, right? So there's the kettle, the coffee next to it. What do I find next to the coffee? The burn cream.
The what?
The what?
And I'm like, what? She went like, just in case you burn yourself.
Oh, the burn cream.
Letting you make mistakes, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I've burned myself, I cut myself, but it's part of rehab.
Yes, I think rehab can be so risk averse, but that doesn't recognize the fact that people need to get back to doing the things that
Yes,
is important for them
yes.
to
No,
do. Yeah.
when I went home, they told me not to cook or not to cut anything up, and I thought, no, no, it's not working like that. This is not how I want to live.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. You want to go back to what you were, or as
Well,
close
as
close as you can.
Yeah.
But I guess if health professionals and you were making goals together, in a way, that should be obvious in the goal setting too. Like you were saying, Ben, that if you wanted to spend, say, your working day at home or whatever, then there'd be a set of things you need to do beforehand. So like I use the example of, say, going to a coffee shop, and being able to, say, walk down the street to a coffee shop or the bar or whatever, have a coffee and then be able to walk home is kind of there's probably about 4 or 5 different sub goals before you can get there. But to know that that's what you want to do in the first place is a really important part of that goal setting, isn't it? Like otherwise people might say, oh, well, is your goal to hang out the washing or is your goal to do this? But if you know what's really important to people, that's going to be the most motivating thing. So like I have real trouble, I guess, a bit with the goals on the whiteboard thing that's happening in Australia a lot with because in a way, if you've got a shared room or even if you haven't got a shared room, it's kind of a bit of a breach of privacy in a way. But on the other hand, it also lets other family, so this is where the health professional might help you and they might write up what your goals are on the whiteboard and so that it's there for people to see and for you to reflect on as well. But it can be a really motivating thing. My nephew at one stage came in and said, to visit me and said, what are these? And I said, well, these are my goals. I said, can you think of any others that I should have? And he said, well, you give really good cuddles, but you can't right now because that arm isn't working properly. Can we add a goal to your list, which is give people 2-armed hugs? And so we added those to the list, and that was a really big motivating thing for me to actually get to the point of being actually able to give a 2-armed hug. No, it didn't have to be perfect, but it was at least a sort of a decent go at the 2-armed hug. And I think so sharing the goals of things and really talking through and making them really real is really important. And that whole thing about making, like, I guess not everybody knows about neuroplasticity, and like, so I think for health professionals wanting to get people to help people be really motivated, they need to do a bit of ed with them about, we are doing this stupid round hole and square peg. The reason we're doing this thing is because we reckon that you might have to do you might need some spatial recognition before you can put the spout of the coffee into the cup and not burn yourself, blah, blah, blah. But it's really good if you get people to, if the person explains what you've got to do beforehand, you go, oh, okay, cool, yeah, I get that.
I think often there is a kind of a sort of a uniformity of the things that get used where maybe it doesn't have to be the the shapes going into the containers. It can be something that is actually much more closely related to Benny getting the coffee out of the coffee tin and doing what you need to be able to do the things that you want to do. I wanted to ask a bit more about goal setting, and if Julie, you've talked about some aspects of it, but if Brian and Benny could also describe any experiences they've had where the goal setting's been done really well and what it is and how it's done when it's done really well.
Well, go on, Brian.
You go first, Benny.
Okay. When I went to Queen Square, that was when That's in London with Professor Ward. That was when goal setting was done properly. There was 4 people in the room, a physio, an OT, and a professional neurologist. And they asked me, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to get in and out of the bath without help. I want to cook and I want to play pool. They went, all right. And the 3rd week, so we did exercises to walk. And the 3rd week, we went to a pub and played pool. Brilliant. That is goal setting. Now, in everyday life, my first goal when I was walking was to walk a mile. For some reason, I had a mile in my head. So I looked at the map, and there were like 3 benches on the route. So I went. The first time I went to bench number 1 and back. Then I went to bench number 2 and back, and then I did the whole mile and back. And I celebrated each accomplishment of that.
With a glass of, with a Guinness?
Actually, it was more than 1. But yeah, you have to. It has to be, your goals has to be relevant for your everyday life. I think that's very, very important.
Yeah. Brian, do you have anything to add to that about how to do the goal setting really well?
Well, yeah, in inpatient, because I had 0 out of 5 strength of my entire right thigh, the immediate goal was to build my strength up so I could start walking. I could walk again. So that was a key objective, key physio objective that I had. So then we went back and we broke it down into the various strategies of reaching and sit stands, and then away I went. And then when I came home, it was more of the same, really, because cognitively I was okay. So therefore walking became a major objective of mine, and endurance. So I started out small. I started doing when I first came home, I could only do 4 laps of the garage, even though I could walk it, but that was so I had to build my strength up. So I then I've got about a driveway which is about 50 metres long, so we started to do reps of that. Then I went down to the end of the street, and then I now do. I built that up, and over 3 years, I now walk from my house to Panania railway station, which is about 5 kilometres away. But then I integrate into that. There's steps up, across and down. There's 60 steps up, walk across the platform and down. So that's my stepping for the day. And to add to that, I've built in what I call a confidence meter, in as much that it's the arm bar that you have to hold on to. So if I have to hold it all the way, it's 100%. It's down now to about 40%. I used to get it down to about 60, then I'd trip and then go back up again. So yeah, that's what I do, and it's become so ingrained into my psyche that I've been doing it for 3.5 years now. And somebody worked out that in 2 years I'd walked the equivalent from Sydney to Lahore in Pakistan. Yeah. Now, why Lahore, I don't know.
Yeah.
She just said she'd worked it out, but it's about 19,000 steps a day.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and I have my wife thinks I'm having an affair with the physio, with the podiatrist, and but as Ben said, it's relevant to what I want to do and how I want to live my life. I was lucky. It was only my right side that was impacted. My sight, my cognitive functions, they were okay. At least I think they were.
And I guess what's really coming out very strongly, that Brian, in what you're saying is the measurement of stuff along the way. Too, I can walk this far, now I can walk this far.
Yeah.
I'm holding onto the railing 100% of the time, now I'm only holding on 60% of the time, now 20. That's a constant measurement of progress.
I've just got. Do you mind if I share the screen and I'll just show you
one of my? Yeah. While you're doing that, I might just say to the audience too, if anybody would like to put any questions to our panel, feel free to put them into the Q&A and we'll pose those questions for you.
Now, can you see this here?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, that's August 2021. That's the sheet that I used. So on Sunday that I was walking through, I did 32,000 steps. There was 240 steps, that's 60 up, down, and back again. 85% contact with my percentage. There is a couple of other things that I want to show you whilst I'm here. There's a little video that I've done. Here I am monopolising the presentation. That's me. 3 years.
More than 3.5 years.
Yeah.
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 I think what Brian's alluded to there is that whilst he's doing the exercise and the rehab, he's also really enjoying himself, and I think that's so much part of the goal setting activity is if you can try and capture the interest for a health professional, if you can try and help the stroke survivor to actually identify what it is that they're interested in. And it's pretty hard sometimes straight after you've had stroke. But I think it gets easier the more you practice that, and also those steps towards it. But after you've stopped sharing your screen there, Brian, I would say that we should have some long-term goals as well. And for me, one of those, which was a long-term goal, was actually to be able to go to a music festival again.
Yes.
Which then, involved multitudes of steps,
Yes.
So there were steps about, some of them were around fatigue management, some of them are around mobility and the ability to use assistive equipment like a scooter. Some of it was around, I guess, some safety things and around travel training or whatever. So I actually think one of the things about goal setting is not only how it's done, but how it's recorded. So, I would urge the health professionals that are listening to make sure that they do keep the goal stuff very well recorded in their notes and reflect that back to the client or the stroke survivor the next time or when they've actually achieved something, because you can't really celebrate something you don't remember that you've achieved. And there's so much happening in your life in rehab that sometimes multiple things are happening and you think, oh yeah, I could do that, but you couldn't last week. And it's really great when someone says, look at you couldn't do that last week. How fantastic. That's a really great motivator, because you're seeing success from your hard work, and even writing it, getting a family member, or because I agree with Brian, I think it's great when family members are involved in rehab, because they can be another point of call. When, say, a health professional says, what do you like about such and such, and you can't think of it, your partner in crime can say, oh, but don't you like such and such? And you go, oh yeah, I do, of course, because you're tired, you've got the whole hospital thing going, you're being in hallways queuing up to wait to go to there or there, whatever, or you're absolutely exhausted from 6 hours a day rehab or whatever, and you just want to sleep. But I think having a record of it, and that's what I also say to people, to encourage their stroke survivor client to actually have a little notebook that they can write in by their bed or whatever.
And I think that's that's that sort of recording, when we talk about sort of what therapists can do as external motivators, that having those records of practice where there is something that's being measured over time, and last week it took you this long to do to do that walk or those 50 reps but you have to have it written down and recorded in order to be able to know what's going on, in order to be able to celebrate it in the first instance. There's a few. Oh, sorry, Brian. I'd just like to go to a few things in the Q&A, but do you want to? There's a specific question here about the Canadian Occupational Performance Measure. Have any of you ever used that? It's a particular tool that's used to help with goal setting. No, it's because somebody was interested in whether you but if you have no experience of it, you can't really comment on it. So so we'll leave that one. There's an interesting comment from Dina about wondering if we actually set junior therapists up to not do this well. And I know, because I teach the baby physios at the Australian Catholic Uni, that we teach them a lot about what they need to get in to do in terms of starting to do an assessment and starting to sort out a training plan and stuff, but that's not prioritizing the relationship building that you're talking about. That is absolutely so critical to making it all work in the first instance. So that is, I think, something that we probably really need to address at an educational level
and it's a
better as well.
I think it's a culture, if the rehab centre or unit encourages that, it's easier for for the young practitioner to pick that up, that it's acceptable or that's a useful thing.
I think the other thing is something I touched on in a lecture, and that is find a mentor. If you can find a mentor, that can be of a great help.
There's a specific question about your thoughts on the value of peer support groups or community programs for stroke survivors. Would anybody like to comment on those kinds of support structures?
Yeah. I'm not a fan.
Is that because of a particular experience, or just doesn't work for you, Benny?
For the simple reason that stroke, it affects your whole life, right? So once in a while, I just love to not think about stroke and just go out with my mate to have a beer and talk about anything else but stroke.
Yes.
Them peer support group, and it's stroke this, it's stroke that. It's donate for stroke, help raise money. No, I'm not a fan. That's personal.
I'm with Ben. I went to the local stroke support group twice, and that's 2 hours that I can't get back in my life. It was poorly
that bad.
Poorly run. It had and it was a heavy victim. I am a victim and all of that. I'm not I'm fairly driven anyway, so support groups aren't. I'm not a support group person, but I went along to see what it was like, and I was not impressed. So I didn't want to go and sit with a group of stroke people to sort of moan and groan about stroke, which I found that was going on. So I stopped going, and I'm not going.
Yeah.
And I think they could be better run.
Yes.
I think the context is important. I actually think there's a place for peer support workers within stroke units. And when I say that, I mean peer support workers who are trained and have boundaries and so forth, in terms of just, I guess, being able to contextualise the experience of stroke and where people are at in rehab. For those that actually don't have a lot of experience, or who don't have a, I guess, a clear view of where they've landed in their life, and also, I guess, for peer support stuff, I think if the peer support group is actually, the focus of it is a particular topic, like my husband and partner in crime, Peter, and I attended a a group with 2 other couples after I attended community rehab about 2 years after my intensive rehab experience. And I found it really interesting because we were quite aware of what sort of things were available and why I'd had, we couldn't figure out why I had a stroke, but anyway, but also about what secondary prevention was and a whole range of things. But for these other 2 couples, no one had actually ever spoke to them, or they had never had the opportunity to share with other people about the experience of stroke and how it had changed their lives. And
yes,
and it was a very short meeting. I think it was about an hour and a half, but we all benefited from it because we all learnt something about somebody else's experience. It wasn't a poor me thing. It was run very well, and had a particular focus, which was, what are the supports out there if you need them? And so that was actually a really good experience. And I think that stroke support groups can be choirs, they can be book clubs, they can be whatever.
Yeah.
They don't have to be that run
all
like
about stroke. Yeah.
And I think sometimes, like recently, I went to a conference. I was sponsored to go to a conference in Adelaide, and I was there with 2 colleagues from the stroke survivor community. And it was like old home week. It was wonderful because we had only ever met on Zoom.
Yes.
And even though we 3 had very different issues, there was a sense of camaraderie because we had been through an experience that no one else had been. So I think there is some advantage, yeah.
Can I just bring a very specific question from Dina here about, can you talk about what supports are available for stroke survivors for living well after stroke long term? Could this be a plug for something?
Yes.
I'm handing it over to you guys.
Well, I think the 3 of us have been involved in creating with Dina, the question asker, cheeky woman, a wonderful website called Rebound, yes. Online, and you can, if you put in iRebound on Google, you'll get the address, and it's a wonderful website. You guys can lead off with the rest of it because we're all in it. All of our faces appear.
Yeah.
Dina says, "Sorry, not sorry." Hashtag. Very cute.
It's got some amazing hints and tips and lifestyle, exercises, diet. It's highly recommended. It's what I call the Everest of stroke rehab in this country. It really, in fact, it's been put together. It was a real collaboration between the clinicians, researchers, and stroke survivors. Yes. Over to you, Ben. Ben's
the cook. He's tried every recipe on the site, I believe.
Yes.
Oh yes. It's just something that didn't exist. So we made it exist. So it's really good. It's fun. It shows you not a physio doing the exercises, the stroke survivor doing the exercise. I think stroke survivors can really make the link between their personal experience and the stuff that goes on the website.
Yeah.
So I think it's really good.
Fantastic resource. Yeah.
It is a great resource. And I think it is for health professionals too.
Yes.
Because, very much so.
Because, if health professionals are trying to encourage people to keep up with their activity after they go home, or to be confident enough to resume activities, it's a really a very approachable way to refer people to those resources.
Yeah. There's another great I don't know if it's called a resource, but Glenys wants to just add something that people can use called the Conqueror's Challenge, which are virtual walks. You input every walk or swim, and when you complete a set distance, you receive a medal. The Conqueror's Challenge. So if anybody wants to look that up, it shows your progress on the app. Yes, and he's saying it's been a great motivator for his daughter.
Oh, okay.
So the Conqueror's Challenge sounds
Check it out.
like a very good one.
I'll check that out.
Yes, yes. Okay, well, I'm going to try and do the summary of all the fantastic things that you have told us about. So I don't know how I'm going to, don't know how I'm going to go. So you might need to pipe into bits, but I think absolutely one of the key things that has come out is about the importance of getting to know the person. You say know the person, not the patient, but getting to know the person, so you know what their lives have been like, you know what's important to them, and you can have obviously much more meaningful discussions than about goal setting, and that it's about really listening to people, and knowing what's going to then capture their interest. And that's obviously going to lead into better goal setting. It's about also about language, being very mindful of language, that we don't talk down to people. But obviously, if you know somebody on a better level, that probably is going to stop you talking down to them too, I think. So so I think that those things just feed into themselves. Don't give people dumb exercises to do. So and Brian's talked very specifically about the need to have very clear explanations about what's the plan and how does this, so that if there is some exercise that might look like some unrelated repetitive thing, and I think specifically sometimes where just some plain strengthening needs to be done, it's absolutely crucial that there's an explanation about how that fits and how that is relevant. Celebrate gains, and in order, as Julie was saying, in order for that to be done well, you need recording systems in place, so that you do have those records of what somebody was able to do 2 or 3 or 3 months ago, so that you can see that change over time, and then you can have those celebrations of change. If you've got the recordings and stuff behind to inform that. What have I left out? Do you want to do one last big message each?
Yeah, all right. Keep rehab fun. It doesn't have to be boring.
Yes.
Yep. And whatever you do, don't take yourself too seriously. It really will, and it takes time. Recovering from a stroke takes time. Don't force it. It will come. If you put in the work, you will get better.
Yep.
Yes, it's a long and winding road. It takes time, and the effort is worth it. That's my message.
Thank you, Benny and Brian. Julie.
My add to that would be to say it's not always brilliant, and you need some days where you go, boo-hoo, what a bad thing has happened to me, and have a little cry. A rehab physio actually said to me one time when I was in rehab, I said, I don't want to be here today. He said, it's all right. He said, tomorrow's your day to cry. And whilst it was funny at the time, I thought he's right. You've got to have, you've got all these times to be motivated and keep strong, but there is also a time where you actually do need to grieve, and maybe do it with a professional. I think that's important too, for you moving forward.
Yes. Well, thank you all very much. And to that, I'd also like to add, there's a lovely thank you here from Dina saying this has been a lovely webinar. Thank you so much, Ben, Brian, Julie and Simone. Incredibly important topics covered with authenticity and wonderful tips. So thank you very much for your time. It's been really fantastic and fantastic messages to get out there. Thank you.
No problem.
Ab.